The Petersons lived in a cozy, two-story house on a quiet street lined with oak trees. Mr. and Mrs. Peterson were kind, friendly folks, always ready with a smile and a wave. But the true heart of their family was Max, a golden retriever with fur the color of sunshine and a tail that wagged like a metronome gone wild. Max wasn't just a pet, he was a member of the family, a furry shadow that followed the Petersons everywhere, offering unconditional love and sloppy kisses. Their days were filled with simple joys, morning walks in the park, playing fetch in the backyard, and cozy evenings spent reading by the fireplace. Max always nestled at their feet. Life was peaceful, predictable, and filled with the kind of happiness that comes from simple companionship. Max, with his goofy grin and boundless energy, was the furry glue that held it all together. He loved his family fiercely, and they loved him just as much. He was protective of them, too, always alert to any strange sounds or unfamiliar faces. Mr. Peterson worked as an accountant, and Mrs. Peterson was a teacher at the local elementary school. They were honest, hard-working people who had built a comfortable life for themselves through years of dedication and love. They had no enemies, no debts, and nothing to fear, or so they thought. Little did they know that the tranquility of their peaceful existence was about to be shattered, and that their loyal companion, Max, would soon be called upon to protect them in ways they could never have imagined. Their peaceful life was about to be turned upside down, and Max's loyalty would be tested in the most unexpected way. The quiet street they lived on held a dark secret, one that would soon come to light, thanks to the unwavering devotion of their golden retriever. The day started like any other. Mr. Peterson kissed his wife goodbye as she headed off to school, promising to pick up groceries on his way home from work. Max, as always, sat by the door, tail thumping a gentle rhythm against the floor, watching Mrs. Peterson until she was out of sight. Later that afternoon, Mr. Peterson arrived home, whistling a cheerful tune. But as he pushed open the front door, the scene that greeted him was anything but cheerful. Furniture was overturned, drawers were pulled out and their contents scattered across the floor, and a sense of chaos filled the air. A cold dread washed over him as he called out, "Hello? Honey, is that you?" Silence. He cautiously made his way through the ransacked living room, his heart pounding in his chest. He stepped over a shattered vase and a pile of overturned books. Reaching the hallway, he saw his worst nightmare, Mrs. Peterson lying motionless on the floor, a dark bruise forming on her forehead. "Honey," he cried, rushing to her side. He knelt down, his hands trembling as he checked for a pulse. It was faint, but there. Relief washed over him, quickly followed by a surge of anger and fear. Someone had done this, invaded their safe haven, and hurt his wife. He scrambled for his phone, his fingers fumbling with the buttons as he dialed 911. "My wife, my house, someone broke in," he stammered, his voice thick with emotion. He gave the operator their address, his eyes darting around the room, searching for any sign of the intruder. While on the phone, Max, who had been strangely quiet, suddenly let out a ferocious bark. It was a deep, guttural sound Mr. Peterson had never heard before, filled with rage and protectiveness. Max stood guard over Mrs. Peterson, his eyes narrowed, his body tense. The peaceful life they once knew was gone, replaced by fear, uncertainty, and the chilling reality of violence. Their home, once a sanctuary, was now a crime scene. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as the first police car pulled up to the curb in front of the Petersons' house. Two officers jumped out, their faces grim as they approached the scene. Mr. Peterson, still kneeling beside his wife, looked up, relief flooding his face. "She's hurt. Please, help her," he pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. The officers quickly assessed the situation. One immediately called for an ambulance, while the other began to secure the perimeter, taping off the area around the house. As more police cars arrived, a flurry of activity erupted. Paramedics rushed inside, carefully lifting Mrs. Peterson onto a stretcher and transporting her to the ambulance. Mr. Peterson, his face etched with worry, climbed in beside her. Meanwhile, inside the house, the remaining officers began their investigation. They carefully documented the scene, taking photographs and collecting evidence. But as each officer approached, Max's behavior became increasingly agitated. He barked incessantly, his teeth bared, his body a taut spring ready to unleash. He lunged at anyone who came near, forcing the officers to keep their distance. Except for one. Officer Miller, a tall, clean-cut man with a reassuring smile, approached Max cautiously. He knelt down, extending a hand slowly, allowing Max to sniff him. To everyone's surprise, Max stopped barking. He sniffed Officer Miller's hand, then nudged it gently with his nose. It was as if he recognized something in the officer, a sense of calm that diffused his anger. The other officers exchanged puzzled glances. "That's strange," one of them muttered. "He hasn't stopped barking at anyone else." Officer Miller stroked Max's fur, speaking to him in a soothing voice. "It's okay, boy. We're here to help. We're going to find out who did this." Max seemed to understand, his body relaxing slightly under Officer Miller's touch. The contrast between Max's reaction to Officer Miller and his hostility towards everyone else was striking, a detail that would later prove to be crucial in unraveling the truth. For now, it was simply an oddity in the midst of a chaotic scene. With Mrs. Peterson on her way to the hospital, the investigation began in earnest. The lead detective, a seasoned officer named Detective Harding, surveyed the scene with a practiced eye. He noted the forced entry, the disarray of the house, and the items that appeared to be missing. "Looks like a standard burglary gone wrong," he said to Officer Miller, who was still petting Max. "They probably surprised Mrs. Peterson, and things escalated." The initial focus was on identifying potential motives. Was it a random act of violence, or had the Petersons been targeted? Detective Harding questioned Mr. Peterson at the hospital, trying to ascertain if they had any enemies or if anything valuable was missing. "We don't have any enemies," Mr. Peterson insisted, his voice hoarse with worry. "We live a quiet life. As for what's missing, I'm not sure. Everything's a mess. But I did notice my antique clock is gone. It was a family heirloom." Meanwhile, other officers canvassed the neighborhood, speaking to the Petersons' neighbors. Mrs. Gable, who lived next door, reported seeing a suspicious van parked down the street earlier that day. Mr. Henderson, across the street, said he heard a loud bang around lunchtime but assumed it was just construction. The information was fragmented and inconclusive. The police were left with a ransacked house, an injured homeowner, and a missing antique clock. The motives were unclear, and the suspects were non-existent. It seemed like a dead end, but Detective Harding knew that every case had a starting point, a thread that could be pulled to unravel the whole mystery. He just needed to find that thread. And little did he know, the key to unlocking the truth was right there in the house, in the form of a golden retriever who only seemed to trust one man. The investigation was just beginning, and the truth was waiting to be uncovered. In the days that followed, Officer Miller became a frequent visitor to the hospital, checking in on Mrs. Peterson and offering support to Mr. Peterson. He brought flowers, offered to run errands, and generally made himself available to help in any way he could. His genuine concern and comforting presence were a welcome balm to the Petersons, who were still reeling from the trauma of the attack. "He's such a nice young man," Mr. Peterson said to his wife one afternoon, as Officer Miller was leaving. "It's comforting to know there are still good people in the world." Mrs. Peterson, still weak and recovering from her injuries, nodded in agreement. "He seems so sincere. I don't know what we would have done without him." Officer Miller's attentiveness extended beyond the hospital. He offered to stay at the Petersons' house to watch over Max, who was clearly distressed by the absence of his owners. He walked Max in the park, played fetch with him in the backyard, and made sure he was fed and cared for. Max, in turn, seemed to trust Officer Miller implicitly, following him around the house and showering him with affection. Detective Harding, while appreciative of Officer Miller's help, couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Max's unusual fondness for Miller, coupled with the lack of any solid leads in the case, made him uneasy. He decided to delve deeper into Officer Miller's background, just to be sure. It was a long shot, but in his experience, gut feelings were often worth investigating. He reminded himself that everyone was a suspect until proven otherwise, even a seemingly kind and helpful police officer. The truth, he knew, could be hiding in plain sight, masked by a charming smile and a reassuring demeanor. 3 months prior, Officer Miller's life was spiraling out of control. A gambling habit, once a harmless pastime, had morphed into a full-blown addiction. He started small, betting on sports games with friends. But the thrill of winning, and the crushing disappointment of losing, quickly consumed him. He found himself chasing losses, betting larger and larger amounts in a desperate attempt to recoup his money. Soon, he was in debt to some unsavory characters. Loan sharks, with their menacing glares and veiled threats, became a constant presence in his life. He borrowed money from friends and family, weaving elaborate lies to conceal the truth about his gambling problem. But the debts kept mounting, and the pressure became unbearable. He tried to quit, attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings and seeking professional help. But the urge to bet was too strong, the lure of a quick win too tempting. He relapsed time and time again, sinking deeper into the abyss of addiction. One night, desperate and cornered, he overheard a conversation between 2 other officers about the Petersons. They mentioned Mr. Peterson's antique clock, a valuable family heirloom that was rumored to be worth a small fortune. An idea, dark and desperate, began to form in Miller's mind. He knew it was wrong, a betrayal of his oath as a police officer. But the thought of escaping his debts, of finally freeing himself from the clutches of the loan sharks, was too enticing to resist. He started observing the Petersons, learning their routines, noting their vulnerabilities. He saw how trusting they were, how easily they left their house unlocked during the day. The plan began to take shape, a dangerous gamble that could cost him everything. But in his desperate state, the risk seemed worth taking. He convinced himself that he could pull it off, that he could get the clock, pay off his debts, and no one would ever know. He was wrong. So very wrong. The antique clock wasn't just any timepiece, it was a magnificent grandfather clock, standing nearly 7 feet tall, with a rich mahogany finish that gleamed under the light. Its face was adorned with intricate gold detailing, and the pendulum swung with a rhythmic, hypnotic grace. It had been a wedding gift to Mr. Peterson's grandparents, passed down through generations, a tangible link to their family history. More than its monetary value, the clock held immense sentimental value. It was a symbol of their family's enduring love and resilience. Mr. Peterson remembered countless hours spent listening to its gentle ticking, a comforting sound that filled their home with warmth and security. He recalled his grandfather teaching him how to wind it, explaining the importance of time and the value of cherishing every moment. The clock also held a secret compartment, cleverly concealed behind the clock face. Inside, Mr. Peterson kept a small collection of family heirlooms, a faded photograph of his great-grandparents, a silver locket containing a lock of his mother's hair, and a handwritten letter from his father, filled with words of wisdom and love. These were irreplaceable treasures, tokens of a life well lived, memories that he held close to his heart. When Officer Miller broke into the Petersons' home, he knew exactly what he was looking for. He bypassed the jewelry and electronics, heading straight for the grandfather clock. He carefully removed it from the wall, struggling with its weight as he carried it out to his car. He had no idea about the secret compartment or the precious keepsakes it contained. He only saw the clock as a means to an end, a way to escape his financial woes. But in stealing the clock, he was also stealing a piece of the Petersons' history, a symbol of their family's love and legacy. The loss was devastating, a wound that cut deeper than any physical injury. Back at the Petersons' house, life was slowly returning to normal, or at least, as normal as it could be under the circumstances. The ransacked rooms had been cleaned, the broken furniture repaired, and the sense of violation, though still present, was beginning to fade. Max, however, remained on edge. He was more protective than ever, constantly patrolling the house, his ears perked up, alert to any unusual sounds. The other officers noticed Max's continued strange behavior. He would still bark ferociously at any officer who wasn't Miller, even if they had visited the house multiple times. "It's like he holds a grudge," Officer Davis commented one day, shaking his head. "Most dogs would get used to us by now." Detective Harding observed Max carefully. He found it peculiar that the dog, who was normally so friendly and gentle, displayed such animosity towards the police, with the singular exception of Officer Miller. He discussed it with the other officers, but they dismissed it as simply an oddity, a quirk of the dog's personality. "Maybe he just likes Miller," one of them suggested. "Some dogs are like that. They pick a favorite and stick with them." But Detective Harding wasn't convinced. He trusted his instincts, and his instincts were telling him that there was more to Max's behavior than met the eye. He decided to consult with a canine behavior specialist, hoping to gain some insight into Max's unusual reactions. Perhaps the specialist could shed some light on why Max seemed to both despise and adore members of the same profession. The detective knew that Max's behavior was unusual, and he was determined to understand it. It was a long shot, but he was willing to explore any avenue that might lead him to the truth. While Detective Harding continued to ponder Max's behavior, he also meticulously reviewed Officer Miller's statements from the initial investigation. He noticed several minor inconsistencies, details that didn't quite align with the timeline or the evidence at the scene. They were small things, easily overlooked, but to Detective Harding, they were red flags. For example, Miller had stated that he arrived at the scene shortly after the other officers, but the security footage from a nearby store showed his patrol car passing by the Petersons' house several minutes before the first 911 call was made. He also claimed that he had never been inside the Petersons' house before the day of the burglary, but Mrs. Gable, the neighbor, recalled seeing him talking to Mr. Peterson in their front yard a few weeks earlier. Individually, these discrepancies were insignificant, but collectively, they painted a picture of someone who wasn't being entirely truthful. Detective Harding felt a growing unease, a sense that Officer Miller was hiding something. He decided to confront Miller with these inconsistencies, but he knew he had to tread carefully. He didn't want to tip his hand too soon, or Miller might become defensive and destroy any potential evidence. He called Miller into his office, offering him a cup of coffee and engaging in casual conversation. He started by praising Miller's dedication and his efforts to support the Petersons. Then, subtly, he began to probe, asking about his whereabouts on the day of the burglary and his interactions with the family. He watched Miller closely, studying his body language, listening for any hesitation or deception in his voice. The conversation was a delicate dance, a game of cat and mouse, with Detective Harding trying to uncover the truth without revealing his suspicions. Detective Harding didn't stop with just the inconsistencies. He discreetly requested Officer Miller's financial records, claiming it was a routine audit. What he found confirmed his worst fears: a mountain of debt, gambling losses, and several large, unexplained cash withdrawals in the weeks leading up to the burglary. The records revealed a clear pattern of desperation, a man on the verge of financial ruin. He also discovered that Miller had made several visits to a casino located just a few miles from the Petersons' house. The pieces were starting to fall into place, painting a damning portrait of a police officer driven to crime by his addiction. Detective Harding also learned that Miller's mother had recently taken out a second mortgage on her house to help him pay off some of his debts. This indicated that Miller was not only desperate, but also willing to exploit his own family to feed his addiction. This information solidified Detective Harding's resolve. He knew he had to act quickly, before Miller could cause any more harm. He shared his findings with the police chief, who was shocked and dismayed. The chief authorized a full investigation, promising to bring Miller to justice if the evidence supported the allegations. Detective Harding knew he had to proceed carefully, building an airtight case that would withstand scrutiny. He couldn't afford to make any mistakes. The reputation of the police department was on the line, and the Petersons deserved justice. He felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, a burden he was determined to carry until the truth was revealed. Detective Harding, knowing he needed concrete evidence to arrest Miller, devised a plan. He casually mentioned to Miller, during one of their seemingly innocuous conversations, that they were checking local pawn shops for the antique clock. He specifically mentioned a pawn shop known for dealing in stolen antiques, located just a few blocks from Miller's apartment. "We've got a few leads," Harding said, feigning nonchalance. "Apparently, this pawn shop is known for taking in items with questionable origins. We're hoping someone might have tried to fence the clock there." He watched Miller closely, noting his reaction. Miller seemed unfazed, nodding in agreement. "That's good detective work," he said, his voice even. "Hopefully, you'll find it soon." But Detective Harding knew he had planted a seed of doubt in Miller's mind. He suspected that Miller, desperate to get rid of the clock and pay off his debts, would be tempted to visit the pawn shop. He arranged for surveillance teams to monitor the pawn shop, hoping to catch Miller in the act. The next day, as Detective Harding reviewed the security footage from the pawn shop, his heart skipped a beat. There, clear as day, was Officer Miller, walking into the shop carrying a large, rectangular object wrapped in a blanket. The object was the same size and shape as the missing antique clock. It was the break they needed. The trap had worked. The evidence was irrefutable. Detective Harding finally had the proof he needed to arrest Officer Miller. The game was over. Detective Harding, accompanied by several officers, arrived at Officer Miller's apartment. They knocked loudly, announcing their presence. After a moment of hesitation, Miller opened the door, his face pale with shock. "Officer Miller, we have a warrant for your arrest," Detective Harding said, his voice firm. "You're being charged with burglary, assault, and obstruction of justice." Miller's eyes darted around nervously, searching for an escape. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his voice trembling. "This is a mistake." The officers entered the apartment, conducting a thorough search. In the closet, hidden behind a stack of boxes, they found the antique clock, still wrapped in the blanket. The discovery was the final nail in the coffin. Miller's denial crumbled. "You have the right to remain silent," Detective Harding recited, reading Miller his Miranda rights. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As they led Miller out of the apartment in handcuffs, a crowd of neighbors gathered, watching in disbelief. The news of Miller's arrest spread quickly through the police department, sending shockwaves through the ranks. The man who had been so helpful, so supportive, was now revealed to be a criminal. The betrayal was profound. Back at the police station, Miller was interrogated for hours. He initially maintained his innocence, but as the evidence mounted, he began to crack. He confessed to everything, admitting that he had broken into the Petersons' house, stolen the clock, and assaulted Mrs. Peterson when she surprised him. He claimed it was a moment of desperation, a lapse in judgment fueled by his gambling addiction. But his excuses rang hollow. He had betrayed his oath, violated the public trust, and caused irreparable harm to the Petersons. Despite Miller's confession, Detective Harding felt a nagging sense of unease. Something still didn't quite add up. He decided to revisit the Petersons' house, hoping to find something he might have missed. As he walked through the familiar rooms, he noticed Max lying in the corner, his eyes fixed on him. He knelt down, extending a hand cautiously. Max hesitated for a moment, then sniffed his hand and nudged it gently. It was a sign of acceptance, a subtle shift in the dog's demeanor. "You're a smart dog, Max," Detective Harding said softly. "You knew all along, didn't you?" He had an idea, a long shot, but he knew he had to try it. He contacted Mr. Peterson at the hospital and explained his plan. Mr. Peterson, though still shaken by the events, agreed to cooperate. The next day, Detective Harding brought Max to the police station. He led him to the interrogation room where Miller was being held. As soon as Max saw Miller, his entire demeanor changed. He began to bark furiously, lunging at the door, his eyes filled with rage. It was the same ferocious bark he had displayed at the Petersons' house, the bark that had puzzled the other officers. Detective Harding opened the door slightly, allowing Max to get a better view of Miller. "Is this the man, Max?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. "Is this the man who hurt your family?" Max barked even louder, his body trembling with anger. He strained against his leash, desperate to get to Miller. There was no doubt in Detective Harding's mind. Max had identified his attacker. But then, Detective Harding did something unexpected. He released Max from his leash. The other officers gasped, fearing the dog would attack Miller. But instead, Max ran straight to Miller, sniffed him intently, then sat down calmly at his feet. He looked up at Miller with a mournful expression, a look of betrayal and disappointment. It was as if he was saying, "How could you do this to us?" The gesture, so unexpected and poignant, broke Miller completely. He began to sob uncontrollably, burying his face in his hands. "I'm so sorry," he cried, his voice choked with emotion. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." The dam had finally broken, and the full truth was about to spill out. Miller's confession, fueled by Max's poignant display of disappointment, revealed the full extent of his crime. He admitted that he had not only stolen the clock but had also intentionally harmed Mrs. Peterson, fearing she would recognize him. He confessed that he had planned the burglary for weeks, carefully studying their routines and exploiting their trust. He even revealed the location of the secret compartment in the clock and the family heirlooms he had discarded in a nearby dumpster. "I'm not a bad person," he sobbed, his voice barely audible. "I just made a terrible mistake. I was desperate." Detective Harding, though unmoved by Miller's self-pity, pressed him for more details. He wanted to know everything, every thought, every action that had led him to commit such a heinous crime. He learned that Miller had initially planned to simply steal the clock while the Petersons were away, but when Mrs. Peterson returned home unexpectedly, he panicked and struck her, hoping to silence her. The confession provided closure for the Petersons, who were finally able to understand the events that had shattered their lives. It also allowed Detective Harding to recover the family heirlooms from the dumpster, restoring a piece of their stolen history. The silver locket, the faded photograph, and the handwritten letter were all returned to Mr. Peterson, who wept with gratitude. With Miller's confession and the recovery of the stolen items, the case was finally closed. Justice had been served, thanks to the unwavering loyalty of a golden retriever and the relentless determination of a seasoned detective. But the scars of the crime would remain, a constant reminder of the fragility of peace and the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface. The Petersons had a long road ahead of them, but they were determined to rebuild their lives, stronger and more resilient than before. News of Miller's arrest and confession spread like wildfire through the town. The Petersons, still recovering from their ordeal, were overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. Mrs. Peterson, though still bearing the physical scars of the attack, found solace in the fact that justice had been served. Mr. Peterson, holding the recovered family heirlooms in his hands, felt a sense of closure he hadn't thought possible. He knew that the memories of the crime would never completely disappear, but he was determined to focus on the future, on rebuilding their lives and cherishing every moment with his wife and their loyal companion, Max. The community rallied around the Petersons, offering support and assistance in any way they could. Neighbors brought meals, helped with errands, and offered words of encouragement. The local newspaper published a story about the case, praising Detective Harding's relentless investigation and Max's unwavering loyalty. Max became a local hero, a symbol of courage and devotion. The canine behavior specialist, who had initially dismissed Max's behavior as a simple quirk, was astounded by the dog's role in cracking the case. She admitted that she had underestimated the power of a dog's intuition and the depth of their connection with their human companions. Officer Miller was stripped of his badge and sentenced to a long prison term. His gambling debts were settled, but at a devastating cost. He had lost his career, his reputation, and his freedom. He would forever be known as the police officer who had betrayed the public trust. As for Detective Harding, he received commendations for his exceptional police work. He was hailed as a hero, but he remained humble, acknowledging that he was simply doing his job. He knew that the real hero of the story was Max, the loyal dog who had seen through the deception and helped bring a criminal to justice. The detective was glad the case was closed. Weeks later, Mrs. Peterson was finally discharged from the hospital, her recovery a testament to her resilience and the unwavering support of her family and friends. Mr. Peterson was there to greet her, his eyes filled with tears of joy as he wheeled her out of the hospital doors. Back at home, Max greeted Mrs. Peterson with unbridled enthusiasm, showering her with licks and wagging his tail furiously. It was a joyous reunion, a celebration of life and the enduring power of love. As Mrs. Peterson settled back into her familiar surroundings, she couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for everything she had. She had survived a traumatic experience, but she had emerged stronger and more appreciative of the simple joys of life. One sunny afternoon, as Mrs. Peterson sat on the porch, reading a book, Max nestled at her feet. Mr. Peterson joined her, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. They sat in comfortable silence, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the gentle breeze. "You know," Mr. Peterson said, breaking the silence, "I don't think we ever really appreciated how lucky we were before all of this happened." Mrs. Peterson nodded in agreement. "It's true," she said. "We took so much for granted. But now, I cherish every moment, every day." They looked at each other, their eyes filled with love and understanding. They had been through hell and back, but they had emerged stronger and more united than ever before. And they knew that, with each other and with their loyal companion, Max, they could face whatever challenges life might throw their way. The experience had changed them, but it had also brought them closer, reminding them of the importance of love, loyalty, and the enduring power of the human spirit. Their peaceful life was returning. Officer Miller's trial was a somber affair. The courtroom was packed with members of the community, eager to witness justice being served. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, including Miller's confession, the security footage from the pawn shop, and the testimony of numerous witnesses. Miller's defense attorney argued that his client was a good man who had made a terrible mistake, driven to crime by his gambling addiction. He pleaded for leniency, arguing that Miller deserved a second chance. But the jury was not swayed. They found Miller guilty on all counts: burglary, assault, and obstruction of justice. The judge sentenced him to a lengthy prison term, a punishment that reflected the severity of his crimes and the betrayal of his oath. As Miller was led away in handcuffs, he looked at the Petersons, his eyes filled with remorse. But it was too late for apologies. He had squandered his chance at redemption. The Petersons, though relieved by the verdict, felt no sense of satisfaction. They knew that Miller's imprisonment would not erase the pain and trauma they had endured. But they hoped that his punishment would serve as a deterrent to others, a reminder that crime does not pay and that justice will always prevail. In the aftermath of the trial, the Petersons received an outpouring of support from the community. They were invited to speak at schools and community events, sharing their story of resilience and the importance of standing up for what is right. They became advocates for victims of crime, working to raise awareness and provide support to those who had suffered similar experiences. They wanted to use their experience to help others. Years passed. The Petersons continued to live in their cozy home on the quiet street, surrounded by the love of their family and friends. The memory of the burglary faded with time, replaced by new experiences and cherished moments. Max, now an old dog with a graying muzzle, remained the heart of their family. He still greeted them with the same enthusiasm every day, his tail wagging with unwavering loyalty. He was a constant reminder of the power of love, courage, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. Detective Harding, now retired, would often visit the Petersons, sharing stories and reminiscing about the case that had brought them together. He would always bring a treat for Max, acknowledging the dog's crucial role in solving the crime. One day, as Detective Harding sat on the porch with the Petersons, watching Max chase squirrels in the backyard, he smiled. "You know," he said, "I've worked on a lot of cases in my career, but this one will always stand out. It taught me that sometimes, the greatest heroes come in the most unexpected packages." Mr. and Mrs. Peterson nodded in agreement, their eyes filled with gratitude. They knew that they owed a debt of gratitude to Max, the loyal dog who had not only protected them but had also helped bring a criminal to justice. He was more than just a pet, he was a member of their family, a hero in his own right, and a testament to the enduring power of love and loyalty. The quiet street was peaceful once more. And the Petersons were happy. And so, life went on for the Petersons and their loyal companion, Max. They never forgot the harrowing experience they had endured, but they refused to let it define them. They chose to focus on the positive, on the love and support they had received from their community, and on the unwavering loyalty of their furry friend. Max lived a long and happy life, surrounded by the love of his family. He was more than just a dog, he was a hero, a protector, and a cherished member of the Peterson family. His story became a legend, a testament to the extraordinary bond between humans and animals. And every time the Petersons looked at Max, they were reminded of the valuable lesson they had learned, that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, and that true loyalty can come in the most unexpected forms. Max was the best dog anyone could ask for.